I want you to picture a scene.
Yeah.
It's nighttime. And you're standing on top of this massive, massive defensive wall. Below you, the whole city is asleep. It feels safe. You know, these walls are thick, they're high, they've been there for generations. But you're not sleeping. You're staring out into the dark, just scanning the horizon.
Okay.
Because you know something that the rest of the city doesn't. You know, a force is coming, something that just tears down kingdoms. And, you know, deep down, these walls you're standing on, they're not going to save you.
That is a terrifying image.
Yeah.
It's the stuff of nightmares, really, to be the only one who's awake in a sleeping city.
Right. And usually in a story, the person standing there is the hero. The general, maybe the king, a seasoned soldier on watch.
But in the story we're getting into today, it's none of those people.
Yeah.
It's a woman. And not just any woman. I mean, we're talking about someone who was, well, marginalized, an outsider living literally on the edge of society.
We are talking about Rahab. And I know what you're probably thinking. Rahab, the Sunday school story. You know, the spies, the flax on the roof. I thought I knew this story inside and out. But then I started reading the stack of research she sent over, and I realized I had missed the main point completely.
It happens a lot with these familiar stories. We get kind of stuck on the children's book version. But the sources we have today, they're going to reframe Rahab entirely. We're not just looking at a survivor.
Yeah.
There is a really strong argument here that positions her as a prophetic figure, a watchman.
A watchman. That's a specific term, right? That's not just a general word.
Oh, very specific. It's a theological title.
Yeah.
I mean, it's usually reserved for heavy hitters like the prophet Ezekiel.
Yeah.
But before we can even get to why she gets that title, we have to understand what she was looking at from that wall. We have to look at the world outside.
And this is where the deep dive got really interesting for me. Because in my head, the Israelites just sort of showed up at Jericho and, you know, walked around in circles. But the research paints a much grittier picture. The geopolitical situation was tense.
Tense is putting it mildly. It was absolute terror.
Yeah.
You have to remember, the Israelites didn't just teleport to Jericho. They had just rolled through the Transjordan.
The area east of the river.
Exactly. And on their way, they crushed two superpowers that everyone in the region thought were completely invincible.
Okay, so who are we talking about? Because usually we just hear Canaanites as this, like, one big group.
Right. Now, this is specific.
Where?
We're talking about the Amorites. And the sources here are fascinating because they describe the Amorites as way more than just a tribe. One scholar calls them a military complex.
A military complex? That sounds modern.
It's not far off in terms of their dominance. I mean, these guys were the political elite from the Persian Gulf all the way down to the Nile. They were famous for their engineering, massive fortifications.
Right, I remember this. When the Israelite spies first saw their cities years before, they described the walls as,
Walled up to heaven.
wall up to heaven. That was it.
Yeah, that's the reputation they had. Unbeatable, impenetrable. And the Israelites had just dismantled two of their greatest kings, King Sihon and King Og.
I feel like I've heard those names, but they always just get glossed over. So who was Sihon?
Sihon was the king of Heshbon. Think of him as the aggressor, the expansionist. He'd already taken a huge chunk of territory from the king of Moab. He was confident.
Okay.
So when Israel just asks to pass through his land, he doesn't just say no. He gathers his entire army and attacks them. He thinks it's an easy win against, these runaway slaves.
And I'm guessing it wasn't.
He was annihilated,
Yeah.
wiped out. And that victory sent this shockwave through the entire region. But then there was King Og.
Og. Okay, this is the part of the research that honestly made me laugh and then get a little creeped out. Because the descriptions of this guy are just wild.
He is the scary one, King Og of Bashan. He ruled 6 fortified cities. But what makes him unique is that the text calls him the remnant of the Rephaim.
Rephaim. I've seen that word in footnotes. What exactly are we talking about? Is that a tribe or is it something weirder?
It is definitely weirder. In the biblical text, Rephaim are often linked with giants, the terrible ones, the enemies of God. They're connected to the Anakim, the giants that made the first Israelite spies feel like grasshoppers.
So when we say giants, are we talking metaphorically, like a giant of industry, or actual physical size?
Well, the text gives us a very specific artifact to answer that. It mentions Og's bed.
The bed. I saw this in the notes. An iron bed.
Yep, an iron bedstead, or it could be a sarcophagus. The Hebrew is a bit ambiguous.
Yeah.
But it was kept as a trophy in the city of Rabbah.
Mm.
And we get the dimensions, 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide.
Okay, my cubit to feet conversion is a little rusty. How big is that really?
It's about 13.5 feet long.
13 feet. That's not a bed. That's a parking space.
It is massive. And think about the psychology of that. Why keep a 13-foot iron bed on display? It's propaganda. It says, our king is a monster. He is larger than life. Don't even think about messing with us.
That makes perfect sense. It's pure intimidation. But you mentioned earlier that the Amorites viewed these Rephaim differently than the Israelites did.
This is a crucial point. We have these ancient Ugaritic texts from the same culture and time period. In their language, the word is RPM. And to them, the RPM weren't monsters. They were the healed ones or the honored ones.
Honored ones.
The spirits of dead warrior kings, their ancestors who they worshipped. They believed these spirits could protect the city, bless the crops. So to an Amorite, Og isn't just a big guy. He's a living link to the demigods. He's their superhero.
Wow, so it's a total culture clash. The Amorites look at Og and they see Captain America. The Israelites look at him and they see a demon.
Precisely. The biblical writers are taking the Amorite theology and just flipping it on its head. They're saying, you call them healed ones, we call them terrible ones, and they have to be destroyed.
So let's bring this back to Rahab. She's in her window in Jericho. She's not an Israelite, she's a Canaanite. So she grew up hearing these stories about how invincible King Og is. And then he falls.
Exactly. And she is not oblivious. This is where her job actually plays a role. She's a prostitute. Maybe she runs an inn or a tavern. In the ancient world, that's where news travels.
The hub of information?
Right. Soldiers, merchants, travelers, they all pass through. She probably hears the rumors before the king of Jericho does.
So she knows exactly what happened to the giant with the iron bed.
She knows everything.
Yeah.
Just listen to what she tells the spies in Joshua chapter 2. She says, I know that the Lord has given you the land. And then she lists the reasons. She mentions the Red Sea drying up, which was 40 years ago, by the way.
40 years, wow.
And then she says, for we have heard what you did to the two kings of the Amorites, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed.
She connects all the dots.
She does what the kings couldn't do. She realizes that if Og the Rephaim, the demigod with a 13-foot bed, if he couldn't stop this god, then a pile of bricks in Jericho has zero chance. She tells them, our hearts melted, neither did there remain any more courage in any man.
That phrase, hearts melted, that's just profound terror.
It is. But here's the difference. The king of Jericho was terrified too. But his reaction, he doubled down, locked the gates, sent soldiers to hunt the spies. He trusted his walls.
But Rahab's reaction was different.
Her reaction was surrender.
And that leads us to the core argument of this deep dive, this watchman concept. Because surrendering doesn't sound very heroic. It sounds like giving up. But you're saying this was actually a prophetic act.
It's a huge claim, I know, but the text really supports it. Let's look at what a watchman actually is. In Hebrew, the word is supe. The most famous description is in the book of Ezekiel.
Okay, walk us through that. What is a supe supposed to do?
Picture a sentry on a city wall. His job is to scan the horizon. If he sees the sword coming, an invading army, he has one job: blow the trumpet, warn the people.
Simple enough.
But the stakes are literally life and death. Ezekiel says that if the watchman sees the sword and doesn't blow the trumpet and the people die, God will require their blood at the watchman's hand.
That is heavy. So there's this intense personal accountability.
It's called blood guilt. It's a legal concept. If you fail to warn, you're guilty of murder. But if you warn them and they ignore you, you're clear. The text says, his blood shall be upon his own head.
Okay, I'm with you on the Ezekiel part, but how does Rahab fit this? She's not blowing a trumpet. She's hiding enemies of the state.
Well, think about her position. She's physically on the wall. She's living in it. She sees the sword coming, the judgment of Yahweh. And what does she do? She frantically works to create a way of escape for her family. And listen to the deal she makes with the spies. The language is shockingly similar to Ezekiel.
I have the quote here. She demands a true sign, and the spies tell her, whosoever shall go out of the doors of thy house into the street, his blood shall be upon his head. But whosoever shall be with thee in the house, his blood shall be on our head.
His blood shall be upon his head. That is the exact legal formula from Ezekiel.
Whoa. Okay, I see it now. That's incredible.
The author of one of our sources argues that she's effectively creating a microcosm of salvation inside her house. It's like Noah's Ark. Judgment is coming for the whole city, but inside this one specific space, there is safety.
But she has to get her family into that space first.
Exactly. She has to go to her father, her mother, her brothers, people who probably look down on her, and convince them that the city is doomed and their only hope is to hide in her house. She has to sound the trumpet to her own family.
That must have been an unbelievably hard conversation. Hey, Dad, I know the walls look strong, but you need to come hide in my apartment because the world is ending.
Right. And she's doing this in the face of her own government, harboring state enemies, because she sees a higher reality.
Mm.
That is the very definition of a prophetic watchman, seeing what others ignore and acting on it to save lives.
It's such a complete reversal of roles. Usually the men protect the women, the king protects the citizens. But here, the king is blind, the men are terrified, and this marginalized woman is the only one with a real plan.
It really exposes the fragility of what we think of as power. You have Og and Sihon, these massive figures. They had the high wall, the iron beds, the legacy of the giants, and they were, in the words of the text, devoted to destruction.
And Rahab has a rope.
A scarlet cord.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about that cord, because the symbolism there is just as powerful as the iron bed, but in the complete opposite direction.
It's hung in the window to mark her house, right? So the soldiers know not to destroy it.
Yes. Does that remind you of anything else in Israel's history? A mark on a house that tells the destroyer to pass over.
Oh, wait. The Passover. In Egypt.
It's an almost perfect parallel. In Egypt, the Israelites were the ones huddled inside, and they put the blood of the lamb on the doorpost so the angel of death would pass over them.
And here, the roles are completely reversed.
Flipped entirely. Now, Israel is the army of judgment outside, and a Canaanite woman, a pagan, an outsider, is the one creating a Passover refuge inside a doomed city. The scarlet cord functions just like the blood on the doorpost.
That is just wild. It completely subverts the whole us versus them narrative. You think Israel good, Canaan bad, but here's a Canaanite woman acting more like a faithful Israelite than most of the actual Israelites did.
You nailed it. Remember, the previous generation of Israelites, the ones who saw the giants and got scared, they refused to enter the land. They lacked faith. Rahab hears about the same God, sees the same threat, and bets everything on him. She has more spiritual insight than people who were literally eating manna from heaven every day.
So we have these two symbols that kind of anchor the whole story. We have the iron bed of Og, and we have the scarlet cord of Rahab.
I love that contrast. The iron bed represents the dead past. It was a monument to how big and scary the Amorites used to be. It's heavy, it's impressive, but it's ultimately just a relic in a museum. It couldn't save Og.
And the scarlet cord.
The scarlet cord represents a living future. Because Rahab doesn't just survive Jericho, she doesn't just walk away into the sunset. Do you know what happens to her after the walls fall?
I assume she integrates into Israel.
She does. She marries a man named Salmon,
Yeah.
and they have a son named Boaz.
Boaz. Wait, from the story of Ruth? The guy who marries Ruth?
The very same. Which means Rahab is the great-great-grandmother of King David.
No way. So she's in the royal line.
It goes even further. If you open the New Testament, Matthew chapter 1, the genealogy of Jesus, there she is. Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab.
That is mind-blowing. The bloodline of this watchman, this prostitute who stood on the wall, it runs through the veins of the Messiah.
It forces us to completely redefine what strength even looks like. In the ancient world, and let's be honest, in our world too, strength looks like King Og. It looks like big military budgets, fortified borders, impressive titles, iron beds.
We like things we can measure. 13-foot beds are impressive.
Exactly. But the biblical narrative tells us that kind of strength is brittle. It shatters. Og is gone. His bed is dust. But Rahab, her legacy is alive. Real strength looked like a woman who was willing to admit she was on the wrong side of history, willing to betray her culture, and willing to trust a God she'd only heard rumors about.
It's the strength of seeing the truth, the strength of the watchman.
And notice the difference in their orientation. The Amorites looked backward. They worshipped their ancestors. The Rephaim, they wanted to keep the golden age of the giants alive. They were obsessed with the past. Rahab looked forward. She didn't cling to Jericho's past glory. She looked toward what God was doing now.
That's a really powerful takeaway. I think a lot of us get stuck guarding our own iron beds, you know? Our past achievements, our old ways of doing things.
We build monuments to dead things instead of looking for the living future.
So as we wrap this up, we've gone from the land of giants to a single window in a crumbling wall. We've seen Rahab not just as a hider of spies, but as a sentinel who saved her family from the sword.
And we've seen that the true watchman isn't always the person with the microphone or the title. Sometimes, maybe often, it's the person on the margins, the one who has no stake in the status quo. And so they could see the cracks in the wall that everyone else is just ignoring.
That's the question I want to leave everyone with today. The sources mention Og's bed was kept in Rabbah for centuries. People probably took field trips to see it, stood there and said, wow, look how strong we used to be. But Rahab's legacy wasn't a museum piece. It was a family.
It was life.
So, in times of massive cultural upheaval, and let's be real, we're living through some weird times. What are we relying on? Are we building iron beds and high walls trying to protect what we think we have? Or are we looking for the scarlet cord? Are we willing to be the watchman who sees the hard truth, even if it means letting go of the very walls we thought were safe?
That is the question. Are we building for a museum or for a lineage?
Something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us into the world of giants and watchmen. It's been a wild ride.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
See you next time.